show up and it's like it's already after time to start. I forgot my Bible on top of that. No, I've got this book. It's got all in, but still I had some. Lost my billfold. Where did it is? Misses. Good morning. This week we're going to continue our study on Esther. We're going to do cover lesson 8, and also we're going to probably start into about the first half of lesson 9. We may get to that here in just a few minutes since we missed last week. We're going to do a quick review of the main characters since it's been a couple weeks since we've been in here. The first one is King Ahasuerus, and he's this king of the long. We've met him in lesson 1. He's the king of this large Persian empire. You have Esther, who's a young Jewish orphan girl who was chosen to be queen to replace Queen Vashti, who was disposed of in lesson 2. We got Mordecai, who's Esther's cousin, who cared for her when her parents died, and he sort of raised her up after she lost both of her parents. And we got to remember too that Mordecai and Esther are also Jews of Jewish descent, and they are living in the Persian Empire. This is around 486 to 483 to 473 BC, and part of the Jews had already went back to Jerusalem, but they had chose to stay here, so that's why they're still here in the Persian Empire, or in Shushan, where the events are taking place here. And the last person we talked about is Haman, and we talked about it a few weeks ago. Haman, he arose out of nowhere. He's an evil, very evil person. He's also known as but he's a very evil person, and he's risen to this position. He's second only in command to the king of the Persian Empire. A few weeks ago we saw where Mordecai had refused. He was in the king's court. He refused to bow down and pay homage to Haman. And this is something that everyone had to do. They'd been commanded by the king. So Haman, we talked about, he hated the Jews. He is known as the enemy of the Jews. He becomes enraged, and he distorts the truth, and he has the king to issue a decree that all the Jews in the whole Persian Empire would be killed on the 13th day of the 12th month. The king was unaware of what race that, the king was unaware of what people he'd even committed this decree to kill, and he also didn't know his own queen was a Jew. So Mordecai and the Jews, obviously they become distressed, and they show their grief by putting on sackcloth and ashes. Mordecai sends word to Esther and told her about the decree, and Esther sent back word to Mordecai and told her that she had not seen the king for 30 days, and if she went before him, that he could have her killed, because that was a law there, that if you approached the king and he did not accept you, he could have you killed. Mordecai responds and tells Esther that, hey, you're a Jew here, and that too, she would also die if this decree was carried out, but if she chose to remain silent, relief and deliverance would come from another place. He also reminded her that becoming queen of the Persian Empire was not by some accident. Here she was, a poor, orphan Jewish girl, and now she's queen of this whole Persian Empire. So, he lets her know that that's not by accident. And Esther replies and tells Mordecai to go and gather all the Jews and to go and fast and pray for 3 nights and days, and then she would go before the king. So that's where we're at. We're caught up to, this point here in lesson 8. And, of course, it's been 2 weeks ago since we've been here. I'm sure a lot's happened and a lot of different changes in the weather. Do we have any sick to announce?
Not doing good. Kidneys are shut down. Her oxygen, she can't keep it up, but she's a DNR, so let her just request.
That's Daryl and Joe's sister, Donna Stinson. So Donna, just continue to remember her. She doesn't sound very good, so at all. Do we have anyone else to mention?
Good to see Miss Ann here this morning.
Hey, good to see you. It's been a while. You doing okay?
Yeah, new treatment.
What's that?
I'm having a new treatment.
You're having a new treatment now? It's good to see you out.
Or Jack Smith is in the medical center in Bowling Green.
Jack's Business and Dental Center. Remember Jack and Sandra, she was at church a couple weeks ago before we had the bad weather, right? Bradley? What? Brad Bird had surgery the first of the week, so remember him. Anyone else? Joey's brother. Eddie Oswald, just continue to remember him. That's Joey's brother. He's been going through treatments and not sure why. But again, just keep that family in your prayers. Keep Eddie.
Fran had sugar and injections in her neck and shoulders, and we're hoping that that'll work. And she suffered from 2 minor burns from when they used the tension on her neck and shoulders to help loosen up those muscles. So we're trying to heal that up. And I just found out last night that I had a neighbor lady that I used to live beside of while I was growing up. She passed away.
Fran, she's taking some treatments and just keeps neighbor here. Anybody else?
Just do 8. Okay. All right, if you would bow with me, please. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us. We thank you for all the many blessings you've bestowed upon us. Dear Lord, we pray that you'll be with all those who's mentioned here today, that you would give a healing hand, that you'd be with the families and comfort them. We know that you know best, and we just pray that you be with them through this time. Dear Lord, as we go throughout this service, we pray that everything we do is accordance to your will. We pray that you'll help us to put away everyday thoughts and focus on learning about your word and praising your name. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, I'll be reading from Esther chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. Now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat in his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight, and the king held to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half of the kingdom." So Esther answered, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the banquet of the wine, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Up to half of the kingdom, it shall be done." Then Esther answered and said, "My petition and request is this: if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches and the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, "Besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet." And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made.
There's quite a bit going on here in this chapter here. First of all, after 3 days of fasting, we're talking about before in last week's lesson, Esther goes before the king and she finds favor in his sight. And the main thing is her life here is spared. Not for sure why, but Esther, when the king asked her what she wanted, instead of her, just coming out and telling him what her requests were, she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. And at the banquet, when the king asks her again, what she wants, she invites the king and the Haman to a banquet the next day, and then she tells him that, then and there she will let them know why she's wanting to come before the king. Also, too, it's interesting at the end of the chapter we'll talk about here is Haman leaves the banquet. Of course, his ego's up. He's proud. Here he is. He's been at the banquet with the king and the queen. But when he leaves, he sees Mordecai. And, of course, and he becomes infuriated when Mordecai, again, he doesn't bow before him. So Haman goes home to his family. He tells them, brags about how great he is, about all the possessions that he has, and gets advice from his wife and all of his friends to go before the king the next morning and have Mordecai killed. And so, again, we've talked about this several times, but again, I think we're starting to see here in this lesson that, the events that play out here, the decisions that made show us that, God, the main theme of this book is that God is in control. God is working behind the scenes, and he's in the background here. And he is not going to allow, up until this point or thereafter, his race, his chosen people, the Jews, to be destroyed by anyone. So I think it's pretty important here, but we'll go ahead and get started. And again, if we get through this lesson, we'll jump into the next one real quick, and then hopefully I'll be back next week and finish up 9 and 10. Any comments or questions so far? Okay. Question number 1. Make sure I'm in the right lesson here. Okay. Why did Esther need to plan her next move carefully, even when King Ahasuerus welcomed her into his presence?
Potentially post-death.
Yeah. She went forward and, she made it through the first chapter. She did get her head chopped off and then she walked in there. That was good. But also, too, even though she approached him and he received favor to her, what was still going to happen?
She still has to ask him what she wants.
Yeah. And the decree's still in effect, So there's still a decree in effect that all the Jews are going to be killed. And what happened in the Persian Empire when that decree was made? Couldn't be overturned. So that decree was still, even though she had approached the king 3 days of prayer and fasting, it worked. The fact that he had accepted her, but now this is just the start of the things that need to happen for the Jews to be saved here. Question number 2. Now, how long did the Jews pray and fast before Esther made her appearance to the king?
3 days.
3 days, yeah. And they talked about, too, a normal fast is anywhere about 1 day, but this is a 3-day fast. Also said fast and no drink, so that was even a little bit more. But it just showed the seriousness of the situation here. It doesn't technically mention prayer, but it's pretty much understood that they did pray. Go ahead, Sean.
You see the symbolization of time, 3 days, and like you just said, 3 days of eating no drink or anything. So it's almost another symbolization of Christ being in the tomb for 3 days to save the nation. I mean, it's all these things kind of, once you understand the pattern, it all kind of ties back to itself.
Yeah, today in the lesson there was 3 or 4 instances they pointed that out. That 3 days, and multiple times.
Saving the Jewish nation that brings Christ to.
Right. Yeah, that was pointed out by some of the authors. That's a good point, though. Question number 3. Where was the king when Esther appeared at the inner court to see him? Yes, in his royal house on his throne there, yeah. Of course, Esther told about how she was dressed. She was dressed in her royal robes. We knew Esther was beautiful at the time because she had been chosen to become queen. So I'm sure she looked, when she appeared before him, it would have been hard to turn her down, I would say, in that situation. And you sometimes wonder, too, Esther at this point in time when she appears for him, whether she was afraid, she was trembling, or she wasn't. And I think after 3 days of prayer and fasting, and knowing that all the people that were there, and we don't know what happened during those 3 days. She may have, we don't know what happened during that time, but just prayer and fasting, or prayer itself, I think at that time when she had probably appeared before the king, she was probably pretty confident in her that she was going to be saved. But it still took lots of courage for her to do what she did here. Question number 4. What did the king extend to the queen?
Scepter.
Golden scepter, yeah. And of course, it said that the book pointed out, it says earlier in the day, he hadn't had any visitors yet, so he might have been in a better mood. I don't know if that's just their take on it. Why she was accepted. I think she was just accepted because, her beauty and everybody, up to this point, everybody has always liked Esther. She had that quality that appealed to other people. But she reached out and she touched the scepter, and it just showed submission. And again, like I said a while ago, her life was spared. She passed the first test. But, you sometimes wonder, why did she not just, at this point in time, ask him, hey, I've got this problem, can you not take care of it, And we don't know the answer there, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact she hadn't seen him for 30 days. And, came into his presence for 30 days, and just to come out and to ask that, you don't know what his response would have been. He may realize that, hey, I've set this decree in place and you're asking me to overturn it, and it might have infuriated him, and he may have done something to her. But I think a lot of it is, just part of the waiting, inviting him to the banquets, the things that she did. I think it's just part of God's plan, and again, with the prayer and the fasting, whether or not that this plan was laid out to her during that time, or if it's just something that she had developed patience but it's not our timing sometimes, it's God's timing. And if for some reason or another, rather than going in there and just demanding what she wanted or putting it out before him, she sort of eases the king's curiosity, some sort of comes before him and does the right things in a slow, meticulous way to get. And again, the outcome is even better than what she wanted. The outcome at first was just to save the Jewish people, but also too, we'll see here in a couple weeks that their enemy was destroyed also. Any comments or questions? Okay. Question number 5: What queen previous to Esther had angered the king by failing to appear when she was summoned? Question number 6. How did Esther respond at her first banquet with the king and Haman when the king asked her what her petition might be?
She wanted them to attend a banquet the next day.
Yeah, attend another one. Of course, probably again, at this point in time means, doesn't know, what she's wanting here. Probably, stoked his curiosity, what she's wanting. Also, too, how did he respond to her when she first came? What did he offer her?
Anything she wants, up to half the kingdom.
To have the kingdom. Would he have done that? No, it was just a metaphor. I think they gave the example back when Herodias came before King Herod and they asked for John the Baptist's head. He asked her too. That's just something that the kings would ask. It showed that they was very gracious and they would give you probably anything that you wanted within reason, but not up to half the kingdom.
If you look at the banquet, what kind of banquet did it say it was?
At first it said that she prepared for him, then it said a feast of the drinks at the end.
A banquet of wine. So
Banquet of wine.
and I think that the Lord in his wisdom and that was done intentionally to loosen him up, you
Yeah.
know. And so, so I think that, and the same thing you said about he can't go back on his word. He had already made this offer to her, so I think it was a well-laid plan.
It's sort of got to know each other again, you might say. And plus, aside from the fact that Xerxes or king here, he liked it. Every chapter there's always a part about wine in there, So we see that's probably something he liked to do. But yeah, that's a good point there. Yeah, it was the feast. They did have the feast of the wine there. He's probably said everything the whole time. Why have I waited 30 days before I've seen her? That's probably what he was thinking during this time after they got together. Question number 7. What did Haman boast about before his family and friends when he went home after his first feast with the king and queen? Yeah. And, if we look back in the last, what Trey read there, verse 11, it said, then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman says, besides Queen Esther and no one but me, again, to come in with the king to the banquet she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. So we see here, he's got an ego problem. Everything is about him here. Everything he says is, like the world revolves around him. He's full of vanity, he's full of pride. He has a lot of possessions. He's had a lot given to him. And, but again, he's not a very humble person here at all. In fact, he's very prideful, he's very boastful, and but it's all about him, you might say. And he's also too proud of the fact too that when Esther, when she invited invited someone to the banquet, she only invited 2 people. It was Haman and the king. So he was one of the main 3 there, you might say. And so that was something he took pride in. Question number 8. What diminished Haman's joy when he was at the king's gate? Yeah, when he saw Mordecai. In verse 13, a different translation of it says, after we read those 2 verses there about all the things that he had and all the possessions that he had, he said, but this is not satisfactory or is worth nothing as long as I see Mordecai, this Jew, sitting at the gate. So we see the hatred that he had there for Mordecai. What was Haman's wife's name? Zeresh. And question number 10. What did Haman's wife and family urge him to do before he had dinner with the king and queen? Yeah, build the gallows. To go before the king, to request that Mordecai be killed. And we'll not talk too much about the gallows because I'm sure that'll come up in the next couple of lessons here. I think if we look back here on page 150, that paragraph right above the conclusion says, his wife Zeresh and his friends had a suggestion. Since you are a great man, they said to Haman, since the king has so honored you, why don't you build a high gallows high enough for the neighbors to see? Be clear that you have built it for Mordecai, 50 cubits high. Haman thought this idea was a good one, and he had the gallows built. This 50 cubits high is 75 feet. And we're not getting into this too much, but gallows, it says to be hanged on, but I think the Persian Empire, they were known for, he would be impaled. In other words, they would have a long pole and it'd be sharp on one end, and they would basically, they didn't go in this way. I think they went this way up, and it didn't kill you, but somewhere or another, they brought that pole up through you, and of course you stayed on that, and you sat there and you suffered, and they raised it up so people could see it. So that was, when it says hanged, that's just a different type of interpretation, but basically what they was going to do, he would be impaled on that pole. Okay. Question number 1. Again, there's no right or wrong, or discussions, I should say. Why do you believe King Ahasuerus extended his golden scepter to Esther? Mm-hmm. That's a good answer there. Hadn't seen her in 30 days. Probably the beauty of it. How, she probably looked, again, she's a beautiful person. And, I think that one of the answers to that too is, it's God's providence at work. We see that, that God is again here, even though we don't talk about him, even though his name's not even mentioned in this book, one of 2 books in the Bible, we see God's providence here being displayed. Question number 2, why would the king think Esther had a petition to bring before him when she had not as yet mentioned any petition? Yeah, she risked her life. You wouldn't just come before the king unless you had a reason to come before him. Question number 3. How did Mordecai's admonition to Esther that he had not revealed her Jewish ancestry serve her when she appeared before the king?
Well, the decree would have been acted upon if he knew that she was a Jew. Yeah. And also Haman, when he saw her, if he knew she was a Jew, he would have said something about it.
Yeah, Mordecai always, even when she was being selected during when the king was trying to find a new queen, he instructed her not to tell everyone that she was a Jew. And so, you sometimes too wonder, well, obviously Haman didn't know she was a Jew, and there are a lot of people there that knew that Mordecai and Esther were related, but obviously Haman didn't know that either, or he would have probably, thought twice. He could have put the puzzle together there, but he didn't. So, but with her not being a Jew, like I said, them not knowing that. When she appeared before, of course, also too, we got to realize too, at this point in time, even the king doesn't even know who he issued the decree against. He didn't realize that it was against the Jews. Haman had just said this group of people needs to be killed, and he said, "Here's my signet ring. Go take care of her." So, at this point in time, he doesn't even know that he doesn't know his wife is a Jew, but he doesn't even know that the decree is against the Jews. And question number 4, what does it say of Haman that his mood changed as it did when he saw Mordecai after his meal with the king and queen? Filled by anger? Uh-huh. What else? Yeah, he filled with indignation. It's his hatred. He had, it's pretty bad that, you could be on top of the world and you can see just one person, it can ruin your day. And that's a sad state to be in. I'm sorry, but and hopefully none of us have that. I know some people get on their nerves, but not to the point that you couldn't sleep or they would drive you that nuts. It's sort of like everybody loves to say, I live rent-free. I live rent-free in your head or something. In other words, if you let somebody affect the way you do, affect your life to that point that you can't even enjoy it. Again, that's a pretty sad state there that Haman is in. I think it's a lesson for all of us today to learn to forgive and to forget and to move on, and it's just not worth it. So, any questions or comments on chapter 8? Okay. Let's go ahead and turn over to chapter 9 real quick. Now, what we're going to do is just look at the first 14 verses here. And what I'm going to do is just sort of read this and just sort of go through it slowly. And we'll probably answer most of the questions here, and then, because there's a lot in this chapter, and first 14 verses, and that'll give out, 10 verses next week, and then the following lessons sort of get caught back up where we need to be at. But starting here in verse 1, it says, that night the king could not sleep, so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Now, you see here, too, the first questioner asked, why do you think the king didn't sleep that night? What's that? Don't tell you. Anybody have any? Of course, we can guess, but yeah, it could be that could be part of it. Could want to know what Esther's petition is. Of course, he's the king. He's got a lot of responsibility. We could all have, but I think too, the book points this out. A lot of people point this out. A lot of it's God's will. I think it was God's will that he did not sleep that night. Now, whether or not he laid down in bed and fell asleep for an hour or two and woke up in the morning, early hours of the morning, or if it was that he didn't go to sleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. We don't know. But again, you could imagine being that much power, that much responsibility, 127 provinces, and the things that are going on there. You could see where you'd have a sleepless night or two. And but I think it's probably most of us. Again, when we read this book, we see that it's God's will, God's plan, because of the things that happen here. But then you get to verse 2. Of course, it talk about and the Chronicles here too that they're talking about is this is the chronicle of the things that happened during the king's tenure. The king had been king for about 10 years or for about 12 years. So all the events that had happened, again, things that happened, they wrote it in the book of the King's Chronicles. It's not the Chronicles that we read here in the Bible. Of course, if you want to go to sleep at night, you could probably read Chronicles too, because that would probably put you to sleep. The first eight chapters is about genealogy, so that would probably put you out. But then verse 2 says, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. That means that lay hands mean they wanted to kill him. The king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So you can imagine, here it is in the wee hours of the morning or at night, and the king's hearing this story. He'd forgot about it. He said, what did we do for Mordecai? And they answered him, you hadn't done anything for him. And the king's like, what? How did we forget to do this? Why did we, what happened here? Because it fell through the cracks. You got to realize that this is probably not the first time someone had an attempt on the king's life. It would probably happen in the future also. So if you have someone coming forward that saves the king's life and that person is not honored, that person is not recognized, why, if something happens 2 weeks, 2 months down the road, why would anyone else go before the king? Because you realize that, hey, you tell the king someone's going to kill him, and basically you don't get anything for it. So I think that's what we see here. And so the king is, he's like, he's pretty distressed. We haven't honored him. And plus, too, during that time, kings were, they were known for their generosity. They were known for their showboating and stuff like that, you might say. So, something here but we mentioned the last 2 or 3 weeks, even when Haman was elevated to his position, we kept, pointing out the fact that, hey, Mordecai never was honored for what he had done. Again, why was he not honored? Maybe it was, again, here God's plan here, because we see here that the king is reminded of the events that took place there. So verse 4 says, so the king says, who is in the court? And now Haman had just entered the court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So, again, this is pretty coincidental here, but how do you think Haman slept that night? Huh? Could be, or if he got past his hatred, or he could be laying there in bed all night long thinking, hey man, I'm going to get up tomorrow morning, go before the king, and hey, you ever know where you go to bed at night, you got something to do early in the morning, you just lay there, you're like, I wish I could just go to sleep and toss and turn all night long, and then you woke up, it's like, so You know, he was there. So the point is here, it's pretty early in the morning when this happens. So you might say, if your business opens at 8 o'clock, it's probably, you know, way before that. You know, somebody's just heading out in the parking lot waiting on you, you might say. But it's early in the morning here. The king just says, you know, is anybody in the court? And they said, yeah, Haman's here. And of course, the king probably, you know, the king said, servant said to him, but Haman is standing here. Haman is here, there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. You know, that's just a coincidence. All of a sudden, the second person in the land, the second person, the most powerful person in the whole Persian Empire is there before, as soon as he realizes that he needs advice from someone. So, in comes Haman. And verse 6, so Haman came in, and the king said, asked him, you know, what shall be done for the man who the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, who would the king delight to honor more than me? Basically what it's saying here, you know, the king says, what shall I do to honor the man who truly pleases me? And of course, what's Haman thinking here? It's got to be me. You know, here I was, I went to the kings, you know, here I was, you know, eating with the king and queen yesterday. I'm going to another banquet today. I've just sat there and told about all my possessions. You know, he's on top of the world. He thinks the whole world is at his, you know, at his fingertips there. So he just thinks he's the man here. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought. And again, this is Haman suggesting to the king what should be done for this person. Let a royal robe be brought, the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, and a royal crest placed on his head. So what he's saying here is, you know, we need to take a royal robe, a horse, and a royal crest. You know, the crest is on the horse's head, not the person's head. Then let this horse, verse 9, let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So what we have here is Haman suggesting to the king what should be done to honor this person that the king delights to honor. Haman's thinking it's going to be him. He has no idea who he's going to be honoring. But it shows here what was he wanting to do? This is going to be all done to him. So here he is going to be riding with a royal robe on the king's horse and being proclaimed that this is the man that the king delights to honor. You know, basically he's going to be king for the day, what it was. You know, he's going to show his, you know, and he's probably thinking too, you know, I'm second in the kingdom. You know, what happens to the king? Anything happens to him, I'm up next. So this was, again, his pride, his arrogance, you know, was sort of what we saw with Absalom. You know, he used to stand outside the gate with David, and people would come to it, and he'd say, well, if I were king, and he had the chariots and the horses before him, you know, was sort of putting in everybody's mind, you know, who's going to be your next king here? So that's what we sort of see here. In verse 10 it says, then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse as you suggested, and do so for, and think about for, you know, you're sitting there waiting to hear your name called. And he said, do so for Mordecai, of all people. Go ahead.
Decided who was going to get the child and all this stuff. I mean, it's God's plan to show that do unto others as you have done to yourself. In other words, almost a mind game of saying, what would you have done to you? Now let's do it to your worst enemy, you know. Yeah. And God playing this out in a way of in other words, I think it goes to, you know, it says that we'll be judged how we judge other people. And so watch what we put on somebody else, because it might be put right back on us. Mm-hmm. And so if we want good things to happen to us, then we also should want good things to happen to other people. I mean, I think it's all kind of a mind game of how God says, watch what you ask for, you might get it.
The thing is, if the king told us that on the front end, I wanted this for Mordecai, what do you think the answer would be? It would have been all this stuff, you know, it would have been all
that's what I'm saying.
It's rural treatment.
But it's God saying, okay, that's what we'll do for your enemy, you know.
Yeah, and that's And that's what's so interesting right here too. You know, what he's suggesting is what he wanted done for himself, not what he'd want to do for other people. But that's not the mindset we should have. We should see what we should, like Sean said, what other people, other people, you know, we talked about servants and stuff throughout the, you know, that's, you know, all the things that we're there for, but, you know, not much humility on Haman's part here. But he said, do so for Mordecai, the Jew, sits within the king's gate. So you can imagine him at this point in time, he's like, oh no, Mordecai, how in the world is Mordecai getting this done? Obviously, he did not know that he had saved the king's life, or he had hoped the king had forgotten about it. So he says, leave nothing undone for all that you have spoken. So the king tells him, do not leave anything. Do everything I told you to do. Make sure you do it. So you see here in verse 11, so Haman took the royal robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai. So he has to go to Mordecai, take the robe, the horse. And you can imagine Mordecai like, what is going on here? You know, why are you hate me, you know? And led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him. And he's not proclaiming, he's not saying this quietly. He has to yell this out. Thus shall it be done for the man whom the king delights to honor. So Haman is here. He's leading Mordecai through the town on the horse with the royal robe and screaming out, you know, this is who the king wants to honor. Verse 12 is pretty interesting too. It says, afterwards Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house. Where does Mordecai go back to? Goes back to work. You know, what does that show you? It's humility. I mean, you know, here he is. He went through town. He was paraded through town on a horse. And the man who hates him the most is yelling out, proclaiming how great he is. And when he gets done, he goes back to work like he's supposed to. You know, that's not our culture today. You know, that'd be all over social media. You know, hey, look how great I am. You know, but it's a different world. But he goes back to work, and it says, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning with his head covered. So, you know, you see Mordecai. You know, before this morning, Mordecai was in mourning. Now he's being honored. And when they woke up this morning, Haman, he was boasting. Now he's mourning. You know, so you see, we're just in a couple hours' time how things changed here in this story, and he said went back with his head covered. Of course, you can imagine Haman walking through the streets after he's walked around proclaiming how great Mordecai is, and he has to walk past all these people. Of course, nobody's going to say anything to him because he still is second in command. So he could have anybody's head chopped off, I'm sure, if he wanted to or whatever. Go ahead. Yeah.
We got the tiger by the tail.
Mm-hmm.
When we think we did something to make ourselves good, then all at once, you know, within an hour or within a few minutes, something can happen. Somebody die, something can happen, and we're at the high and the low at the same day because we think we're in charge.
And there's a lot of lessons here. You know, like I said, back when he's talking about the verses of the chapter before, all the things that he had and stuff. You know, we should never ever feel like what we've done in this world and accomplished is on our own merits. It's because of the grace of God that we're all standing here right now. And none of us deserve anything but death, yet we're here. And we have to really believe that. So, I mean, you know, we are blessed, and we've all, and like I said, I've asked this dozens of times up here about how blessed we are in this country. You know, even the poorest of this people in our nation are still richer than the majority of the world. It's not all about the United States. I think sometimes we think we're the only country out there. You know, there's 370 million people here in the United States. Was it 7 billion or is it up to 8 billion? I don't know. It was 7 billion the last I heard. You know, but still, there's a lot of people in this world. And, it's not all about us. And then it says, but then the next thing it says, when Haman told his wives, Zeresh, and all his friends, everything that had happened, wise man and his wife said to him, Mordecai before you, whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him. So basically she says, it'll be fatal for you. Now, I sometimes want to hear, this is my last point, if they thought, wow, he's a Jew, we know the Jews are a different people, they're a different breed, you know, I hate to say that, but we know they're God. And you messed with the wrong person because their God is, I'm sure that during this whole there's 127 provinces here, they're not all Jewish, there's only a small amount of them that are Jews, But to think that, you know, we know this group of people that's been a thorn in our, no, it's not a thorn in our side, but that's lived amongst us. They have different customs, different religions, or different religion, and we know their God is powerful. And we see here that God's will be done, so you better watch out, you know. So we're finished this week, and again, next week we'll hopefully I'll finish up 9 and 10. Thank you.